I'm letting your mother live in my apartment, my daughter-in-law said into the microphone, smiling like she'd just offered a toast. And that barn is theirs now. I didn't blink. I didn't argue. I didn't even shift my shoulders in my navy dress. I simply set my napkin down, slid my chair back without a sound, and picked up my car keys from beside my plate. Then, my lawyer called. Not to tell me I'd won. Not yet. Just one calm sentence that made the room feel different the second I heard it. I walked out of the reception hall under the glow of white string lights, my phone vibrating in my palm, my face still composed like I was headed to the restroom. Tell me exactly what was changed. Tell me where you're listening from. The air outside was cool, and the music muffled behind the doors like a party happening for someone else. My fingers were steady when I answered, and I kept my voice low. Don't go back in there, my lawyer said. Go straight to your property. Check your entry points, and do not confront anyone alone. That was the first pressure, and it landed clean. He was warning me like something was already in motion. I stood beside my car, thumb hovering over my screen, and a new detail surfaced in my mind like a flashing hazard sign. 2 days earlier, my daughter-in-law's mother had left me a voicemail, sweet as pie, asking, "Just curious, is the gate still the same?" On my phone, the voicemail still sat there with its timestamp. I tapped it, listened again, and this time I didn't hear curiosity. I heard planning. I saved it, screenshot the call log, and emailed it to myself with one word in the subject line: gate. But that wasn't the worst part. Back inside, I could hear my son laughing, glass clinking, people cheering like the microphone moment had been charming. I could picture my daughter-in-law's sister, chin lifted, watching me for a reaction. Instead, I opened my glove box, pulled out the thin manila folder I'd brought because I'd learned to carry documents the way other women carried lipstick. Inside was a copy of my property deed, edges worn, name clear. I didn't wave it around. I didn't need to. I just needed to know where it was. My lawyer's voice stayed in my ear. If someone is on your property without permission, he said, we treat it as trespass, but we need your timeline tight. Timeline. That word hit like a bell. I looked through the windshield at the dark road leading back to my farmhouse, and I realized the wedding wasn't the event tonight. It was the distraction. I started the engine, keeping my face calm even as my stomach tightened, and I drove out of the lot without looking back at the reception doors. Halfway down the highway, my phone buzzed again. Another missed call, not from my lawyer this time. It was my son. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because if he was calling, it meant they'd noticed I was gone. And if they'd noticed, they might speed up whatever they'd started. My headlights swept over the quiet road, and I gripped the steering wheel with both hands, repeating one thought like a prayer. Get there, see it, document it. When my farmhouse finally came into view, the silhouette of my barn rose behind it like a dark promise, and the gate, my gate, was standing open. What exactly had they already done before I got there? The open gate wasn't just a sign, it was a message. It meant someone had either been given access or taken it. I pulled onto the gravel slow, headlights catching the metal latch, and I felt my heartbeat climb, not from fear of the dark, but from the insult of it. My car keys felt heavy in my hand as I killed the engine and sat for one breath, listening. No music, no crickets loud enough to cover footsteps, just the faint hum of my own thoughts. Then I noticed a new detail. Tire marks, fresh and wide, pressed into the edge of the driveway where my grass should have been untouched. I raised my phone and snapped photos. Gate latch, tire tracks, the angle of the hinge, because dignity doesn't mean denial. It means discipline. That's when I remembered my son's helpful visit 2 weeks earlier. He'd showed up smiling, said he wanted to check the barn lock, said he didn't want me handling heavy stuff. He'd stood by my mudroom wall where I keep my spare keys on a hook, and I'd watched him glance at them like they were his by default. On my phone, I pulled up our old messages, scrolling until I found it. There it was, evidence seed number 2, his text. Mom, it's just temporary family help. I'll grab the spare set so I can check things when you're busy. Temporary help. As if my home was a community center and my life was up for committee vote. I screenshot the text, then another message right after it where he'd added, "Don't worry, I'll put them back." Pressure tightened again, because now I wasn't dealing with strangers. I was dealing with familiarity used as a crowbar. I stepped out of the car and clicked my flashlight on, beam sweeping the porch. My front door looked shut, but the deadbolt sat at a different angle than usual, like it had been turned more times than I'd turned it. But that wasn't the worst part. A cardboard box sat just inside the screen door, visible through the glass, plain brown, taped, the kind you don't bring for a short visit. I didn't go in. Not yet. I walked the perimeter first, because my lawyer's warning echoed. Don't confront alone, and don't lose your timeline. Around the side, the kitchen window showed a faint light. I never leave that on when I'm away. My throat went dry, and I kept my breathing slow on purpose. I backed away from the house and moved toward the barn. The barn doors were shut, but the padlock had a different shine, like a newer metal than mine. I didn't touch it. I photographed it. I zoomed in until I could see the brand etched on the lock body. A new discovery landed hard. Someone had replaced my lock, which meant someone had made a decision about my property without ever speaking to me. I returned to my car, shut myself inside, and called my lawyer again with my hands still steady enough to dial clean. "Gates open," I said. "New lock on the barn, boxes in the house." He didn't gasp. He didn't dramatize. He just said, "Good. Now call the non-emergency line. Report trespass the moment you confirm occupants." Another pressure arrived right on time. If I hesitated, they'd settle in deeper, change mail, start utilities, claim residency. I watched my phone screen glow, thumb hovering over the call button, and my son's name popped up again with a new text. "Don't embarrass us tonight. Just go to the apartment." Apartment. The word tasted like someone else's rules. I didn't answer him. I didn't need his permission to protect my own home. I took one last photo of the open gate, then pressed call to report what I was seeing. And as the line rang, I realized something chilling. They weren't asking me to leave. They were acting like I already had. What would I find when I finally opened my own front door? The dispatcher kept her tone neutral, asked for my address, asked if I felt safe. I answered carefully, like every word might become part of a paper trail later, because it would. When I stepped onto my porch again, I could smell food. Not my food. Something garlicky and warm, like someone had decided to make themselves comfortable. I unlocked the screen door and felt a strange resistance, like the latch had been adjusted. My jaw tightened, but my hands stayed calm. Inside, the cardboard box I'd seen earlier wasn't alone anymore. There were 3, stacked beside my entryway table, each marked in thick black marker. Linens, kitchen, dad's tools, not my dad's, hers. That's when I heard a laugh from my kitchen, low, unfamiliar, and the clink of my own dishes. I stepped forward just enough to see them. My daughter-in-law's parents stood at my stove like it belonged to them. Her sister sat at my table with her shoes off, scrolling on her phone, a suitcase open beside her chair. My home looked staged for someone else's life. Pressure struck fast. If they stayed overnight, they'd claim I allowed it. If I argued, they'd call me unstable. If I cried, they'd call me dramatic. So I did what I do best. I observed. On my kitchen counter sat a sheet of paper with an official-looking header. I didn't touch it. I leaned close enough to read it. Evidence seed number 3, a utility start confirmation, electric service, issued that morning in my daughter-in-law's father's name, with my farmhouse address printed clean and bold. That wasn't a visit. That was an occupation plan. I lifted my phone and took photos of the document, the boxes, the suitcase, the stove in use, the shoes by my chair. I made sure the timestamp was visible on my screen in one shot, because timelines win cases, not tears. Type respect if you've lived this. My daughter-in-law's mother turned and smiled like we were hosting together. "Oh, you're back early," she said, like I'd returned from the store, not escaped a public humiliation at my son's wedding. Her husband didn't even look guilty. He just nodded toward the barn through the window. "We'll need access out there tomorrow," he said. We already moved some things. Into my barn, after announcing it was theirs now. But that wasn't the worst part. My son stepped into the doorway behind them, still in his wedding suit, tie loosened, face tight with controlled annoyance. He looked past me to the boxes like he expected me to accept them as normal. "Mom," he said quietly, "don't make a scene. It's just easier this way. They need space, and you'll be fine in her apartment. Fine. In a place offered like charity." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give him the satisfaction of emotion he could twist. I simply said, "This is my home." My daughter-in-law's sister smirked. "Not for long," she murmured, not quite under her breath. My phone vibrated. My lawyer again. I stepped back into my entryway, holding my phone low so no one could see my screen, and answered softly. "I have confirmation they're inside," I said. "They turned on utilities." "Good," he replied. "Do not argue. Keep recording evidence. Police are on their way. And tomorrow morning, we deliver a formal notice to vacate." New pressure rose immediately. Tomorrow morning meant they had the night to spin a story. It meant my son had the night to recruit relatives, to make me the villain, to claim I invited them. As if on cue, my daughter-in-law walked in, still wearing her wedding makeup, still glowing from applause, and held out her hand like she was offering peace. "Let's not ruin tonight," she said. "Just sign the agreement in the morning, and we'll all move on." Agreement. She nodded toward my dining table where a folder had appeared, thick and waiting, a pen placed neatly on top like a trap dressed as paperwork. And I knew then this wasn't just about a barn or a kitchen. It was about getting my signature while I was tired and cornered. What exactly were they planning to make me sign at that morning meeting? The police arrived in 2 cars, lights off but presence loud enough to change the air in my driveway. I stayed on my porch, phone in hand, deed folder tucked under my arm like a shield. One officer asked for my name and proof of ownership. I didn't argue. I didn't perform. I opened my manila folder and showed the deed copy with my name on it, then offered my driver's license. That simple act, paper meeting paper, shifted the balance. Inside, my daughter-in-law's parents started talking fast. "We were invited," her mother insisted, voice suddenly trembling like a rehearsed innocence. "We're family. We're just helping." The officer asked one clean question. "Who invited you?" And that's when my son tried to step in front of the truth. "I did," he said, jaw clenched, eyes flicking to me like I was supposed to play along. But my lawyer's voice echoed in my head, timeline tight. I pulled up my phone and showed the officer the utility start confirmation photo, then the time-stamped pictures of the boxes labeled Dad's Tools, then the screenshots of my son's temporary family help texts. Seed number 2 paid off, right there on my porch, without me raising my voice once. The officer's expression didn't turn dramatic. It turned procedural, which is the best kind of expression in a moment like this. "But that wasn't the worst part," I said quietly, and even the words felt like a hinge turning. I played the voicemail from my daughter-in-law's mother, evidence seed number 1, soft enough that only the officer could hear. "Just curious, is the gate still the same?" The officer looked toward the open gate, then back at her, and I watched the smallest crack appear in her composure. Seed number 1 paid off too, pre-planning, not confusion. The officer explained calmly that family disputes can become civil matters, but if the homeowner is present and says someone does not have permission to be inside, the officers can escort them out to prevent escalation. Pressure returned in a new form. My son leaned close and hissed, "You're really doing this? On my wedding night?" New discovery followed immediately. He wasn't ashamed they'd moved in. He was ashamed he might look bad. I kept my voice level. "You already did this," I said. "I'm just documenting it." The officer stepped inside, asked the occupants to gather essentials, and told them they needed to leave for the night. Not forever, yet, but enough to stop the claim that they'd settled in. My daughter-in-law's father tried a new tactic. "We have rights," he said. "She's moving out anyway." "Show me paperwork," the officer replied. Paperwork. My daughter-in-law glided forward with that folder again, the one she'd placed on my table like a centerpiece. She held it up, smiling. "We do," she said. "We're meeting tomorrow. We'll make it official." Official. That word should only come from a notary, a court, or a recorded deed, never from a bride with a microphone. My lawyer called again while the officers stood in my foyer. I stepped aside, phone pressed to my ear, eyes on that folder. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "we do this clean. I'm drafting a formal notice to vacate and a cease and desist. You will not sign anything they present. You will request certified copies of your deed from the county, and we will create a file. A file, a real one, with dates, photos, screenshots, and names." Then he added, They're trying to trade your farmhouse for an apartment arrangement so they can claim you agreed to leave. We stopped that by proving you never consented. New pressure rose, heavier than before. If I mishandled tomorrow's meeting, they'd twist my silence into consent. The officers escorted the in-laws out with suitcases and boxes carried awkwardly, their faces hard, their whispers sharp. My daughter-in-law's sister shot me a look that promised payback, not regret. When the house was quiet again, I walked to my door and looked at the deadbolt. It didn't feel like mine anymore. I set my deed folder on the table, placed my phone beside it, and stared at the pen they'd left behind on top of their agreement folder. Tomorrow they wanted me at a table with that folder and that pen. So I called my lawyer back and said, "Where do you want to meet?" And he answered, "At your kitchen table, with witnesses." What would happen when they showed up expecting my signature and found my lawyer waiting instead? By morning, my farmhouse smelled like coffee and fresh steel. I'd been up before dawn, not crying, not pacing, working. A locksmith had come early, and I watched him install new deadbolts with steady hands, the metal clicking into place like punctuation. Outside, I'd repositioned my security cameras, making sure the lens caught the gate and the driveway in a clean, wide angle. Objects don't lie. They just record. My lawyer arrived at 8 with a slim briefcase and one sentence that grounded me. "You're doing everything right." He didn't take over. He didn't perform. He sat at my kitchen table and asked me to place my evidence in front of him like cards in a careful game. Phone screenshots, voicemail, utility confirmation photo, deed copy, police report number written on a notepad. The pressure showed up at 9 on the dot. My son's truck rolled in first, then my daughter-in-law's SUV. Then, like a coordinated parade, her parents and sister pulled up behind them, faces set, shoulders squared, ready to reclaim the narrative. They walked in without knocking, out of habit, and stopped short when the new deadbolt held. My daughter-in-law's smile faltered as she realized she couldn't just family her way through my door anymore. I opened it myself, calm and controlled, and stepped back. "Come in," I said, because I wasn't afraid. I had structure now. They entered and froze at the sight of my lawyer sitting at my table. The folder they'd brought, thick, confident, was clutched tighter in my daughter-in-law's hands. She recovered fast. "We're just here to finalize what we discussed," she said brightly, sliding their folder across my table toward me like it was a gift. "It's simple. Mom signs. We help her transition to the apartment, and my parents take over the barn and the farmhouse until things settle. Settle. As if my life was unstable inventory. My son wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the pen like it might rescue him. My lawyer didn't touch their folder. He placed his own document on the table instead. Formal notice, clean letterhead, dates crisp, language plain and sharp. "This is a notice to vacate," he said, voice polite, not loud. "And a cease and desist regarding unauthorized entry and occupancy." My daughter-in-law's father leaned forward. "We're not squatters," he snapped. "We're family." My lawyer nodded once, then asked one question that landed like a judge's gavel without needing a courtroom. "Show me your proof of consent," he said. "In writing, with the homeowner's signature, not your interpretation, not your microphone speech. Proof." Silence filled the kitchen. But that wasn't the worst part. My lawyer slid my phone screenshots toward them. Voicemail timestamp, my son's temporary family help texts, the utility confirmation in her father's name. He didn't accuse. He simply laid out the timeline like a ruler on a table. "You initiated utilities before any agreement," he said. "You entered without permission. You attempted to create residency. That's not help. That's a takeover attempt." My daughter-in-law's sister scoffed, but her eyes flicked to the security camera pointed right at the driveway. Red light steady, recording every expression. New pressure hit. They realized their behavior was being documented now, not absorbed. My son finally spoke, voice thick. "Mom, why can't you cooperate?" I looked at him, and my discovery was painful and clean. He wasn't confused. He was committed. He'd chosen the easier path, handing my home to his wife's family, because standing up to them would cost him comfort. I didn't yell. I didn't call him names. I turned to my lawyer and said, "Read the notice." He did calmly, line by line, deadline to vacate, no re-entry, all communication through counsel, trespass enforcement if violated. My daughter-in-law's mother's face tightened. "You can't do this. she whispered, because she'd counted on my politeness as a lockpick. My lawyer's response was simple. "We already did," he said. "The police report exists. The timeline exists. The certified deed copy is being requested. If you return, you will be removed again." The power flip wasn't emotional. It was administrative. And it was real. My daughter-in-law's hand trembled as she reached for her folder, the one she wanted me to sign. She pushed it toward me one last time. "Just sign," she said, voice sharpening. "Or we'll make sure everyone knows what you are." I picked up my own pen, my pen, not hers, and set it down without signing anything. Then my lawyer looked at me and asked, "Do you want to proceed with formal trespass enforcement if they refuse to leave by the deadline?" My son's eyes widened, and my daughter-in-law's father stood halfway up, fists on the table like he might try intimidation next. And in that moment, I realized the next decision would decide whether they learned the boundary or tested it harder. Would they walk out on their own, or would I have to make the second call that ends families the way paperwork does? They didn't walk out with apologies. They walked out with anger. And that was fine, because anger doesn't transfer ownership. Before I even let myself sit down, I slid the police report number onto a fresh sheet of paper and tucked it into the front of my evidence folder, right beside the printed photos from my phone. I wasn't collecting memories. I was building a record. The deadline my lawyer set wasn't dramatic, just firm, written, served properly. That afternoon, he arranged service the right way, not with threats, not with shouting, but with documented delivery that couldn't be misremembered later. He handed me the mailing receipt and the green return card when it came back, signed and dated, and I placed it in the folder like a final stitch. My son tried calling again and again. I let it ring. My piece wasn't up for negotiation on his timeline. I watched his name light up my screen and set the phone face down on the table, right next to my car keys, like I was putting him back where he belonged. Outside my decisions for now. 2 days later, my security camera caught the first attempt. My daughter-in-law's sister approached the gate with a key in her hand like she was still playing house. The new lock held, the camera recorded, and the moment she realized she couldn't get in, she did exactly what people do when entitlement meets a boundary. She tried to rewrite the story. She called from the road and left a voicemail. "We're just trying to pick up our things." I forwarded it to my lawyer and didn't reply. Then I opened the camera app and saved the clip to a separate folder, the timestamp glowing in the corner of the screen like a quiet witness. Because by then, the process was already moving, and that's what they never understood. I wasn't fighting them in the family arena anymore. I was protecting myself in the legal one. When they returned the next morning with my daughter-in-law's father acting like a foreman, the responding officer recognized the address from the previous report. He asked one question, "Do you have permission to enter?" They couldn't produce it. My lawyer met them on my porch with a copy of the notice and the report number written clearly at the top. He didn't argue about feelings. He pointed to the paper. "This is trespass," he said. "Leave." And because the documentation was clean, photos, timestamps, utility confirmation, screenshots, prior report, the officers did what officers can do when the facts are orderly. They escorted them off my property. No shouting, no chaos. Just consequence. After they pulled away, I stood at my open gate for a long moment, with my phone in one hand and my keys in the other, staring at the latch like it had betrayed me. Then I closed it myself and snapped it shut until it clicked. A small sound that felt bigger than it should have. But that wasn't the part that healed me. The part that healed me was what happened next. I went to the county office and requested a certified copy of my deed, the kind that feels heavier in your hands because it's official in a way family lies can't undo. I left with stamped pages, a receipt, and the strange relief of bureaucracy done right. I placed that certified copy in a new folder in my safe. Then I did the quiet follow-through that women like me do when we finally stop explaining ourselves. I updated my estate documents with my lawyer. I removed any assumption-based access. I changed who could make decisions if I couldn't. I revoked any helpful arrangements that depended on someone else's goodwill. I also called the utility companies and put a password on every account tied to my address, because I'd learned how quickly someone can turn help into leverage with one phone call. At the post office, I asked what I needed to do to keep my mail from being redirected or managed by anyone else, and I walked out with a small printed confirmation slip I folded and added to my folder. And I made a new rule. No one gets a key just because they share my bloodline. My son showed up alone one evening, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. The wedding glow was gone. Reality had replaced it. He stood on my porch like a guest, because that's what he was now until trust was rebuilt. "I didn't think it would get this far," he said. I believed him. Not because he was innocent, but because people like him never think consequences apply to them until they do. I held my new keys in my palm, the metal cool, and I said, "It got this far when you used my home like a bargaining chip." He swallowed. "She said you'd be fine," he murmured. "And you believed her," I said softly, because it was easier than standing up. His eyes flicked past me into the entryway, and he noticed the locksmith invoice on the side table and the small black camera mounted near the doorframe. For the first time, he looked less offended and more aware. I didn't slam the door. I didn't banish him forever. Justice for me was never about drama. It was about dignity and protection. "You can come in," I told him, "but you don't get to speak for me again. You don't get to offer my property again. And you don't get to put a microphone in someone else's hand and call it family." His eyes filled, and he nodded once. The first real nod I'd seen from him in a long time. Inside, my house felt like mine again. The locks clicked the way I liked. The cameras watched quietly. The gate stayed closed unless I opened it. A week later, my lawyer called with the last piece of closure. The formal file was complete, the notice complied with, and any future attempt would be handled faster because the groundwork was already set. I thanked him, hung up, and sat at my kitchen table with my certified deed copy in front of me, fingers resting on the paper like an anchor. I ran my thumb over the raised stamp the way you might touch a scar you survived, not to reopen it, just to remember you healed. If you're listening and you've ever been treated like a burden in your own life, I want you to know something. Silence can be strength when it's followed by action. And if you want, subscribe and stay with me, because respect isn't requested in my house anymore. It's required. In the end, the barn stayed where it had always been, on my land, under my name, behind my locked gate.